I need to tell you that I'm an import from Pennsylvania. I grew up near Erie, Pennsylvania. And what I knew of the Erie Canal was we sang 15 miles on the Erie Canal in music class. Okay, that was my knowledge. Explanation point. I didn't know anything about cobblestone houses. Never seen one, didn't know they existed. I now live in one. So I'm truly an import that has learned a lot in the last years of living here in Orleans County. And I thought, well, when we're celebrating the anniversary for the Erie Canal, that I probably ought to do something talk-wise on the Erie Canal. But it's also their influence on Cobblestone, which I've been involved with since about the time we moved here in the 70s. So I thought, well, why not talk about the influence of the two? Because I had heard rumors since I lived here that when the Masons got done on the Erie Canal, they moved back up and they built the cobblestone houses. No. Nope. Didn't happen. I'm not saying there was absolutely nobody. There might have been one person or two people that went up and used their skills. But the vast majority of cobblestone houses were not built by Erie Canal Masons. The cobblestone started about 12 years after the canal actually opened to being a fad in the 1830s and 40s. But getting back to the beginning, in the Erie Canal, the overland transportation was extremely expensive at the turn of the 19th century. It cost the same amount of money for a merchant to ship a ton of freight across the Atlantic Ocean as it did to send some goods 30 miles overland by wagon. So it was not cost-cutting to use your wagon and your team. It was an expensive venture. DeWitt Clinton emerged as the leading advocate for the canal in New York State, where his uncle George Clinton had served as the first governor. As the mayor of New York City, Clinton took a special interest in the canal and defended the proposal when it appeared before the legislature. Canals were expensive undertakings and would require considerable loans of burdensome taxes. The location of the proposed canal was another consideration. Local jurisdictions divided various interests who supported different locations. So they had people competing for being the location for the canal. The Erie Canal required incredible feats of engineering to complete. The country possessed only 3 canals more than 2 miles long, with the longest being 27 miles before the Erie Canal was built. The Erie Canal came to span 363 miles. So you can see what people thought about this canal, this huge thing they're proposing on building. Upon completion in 1825, after 8 years of work, it was the largest canal in the world, including 83 canal locks and rising 670 feet in elevation. The locks constructed at Lockport were higher than any previously attempted and allowed a canal barge to ascend 70 feet over solid limestone embankment. So this was technology at the top of the line. This was, man, I never thought that would happen. Imagine they lifting that over 300 feet. I mean, can you see what the population was talking about with this phenomenal thing going through their area? More than 75% of the more than 9,000 canal diggers who worked on the project were from upstate New York. So they hired local people to physically dig the canal. There wasn't front loaders, anything we know today to dig a long portion. It was manpower, literal manpower. Most of them were from New York State. The rest were Irish immigrants. The engineering behind the canal is even more impressive when you consider that the builders were amateurs who did not possess any formal training in engineering. This canal building is what kicked off a lot of schools of engineering, to try and teach other people what they had learned by physically doing the accomplishing of this canal. The Erie Canal was the first major canal construction along an existing trade route. So going from east and west was a trade route, but this actually opened it up to faster completion of trade. An upstate New York merchant, Jesse Hawley, described it as the longest canal in the least time, with the least experience for the least money, and of the greatest public utility of any other in the world. So with less money and manpower, we did the ultimate. We built the ultimate canal. Within a few years of its completion, it was already carrying goods worth double the value of the freight shipped down the Mississippi to New Orleans. Tolls collected along the canal repaid the construction costs in 9 years. So in 9 years, they had broken even on the cost of the canal. I think that's quite a phenomenon. It showed that a lot of people were using it too. By linking the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes and west, the Erie Canal transformed the state of New York and cemented New York City's status as the nation's most preeminent commercial metropolis. So it was actually the beginning of New York City's impression on the world of being a metropolis of economic boom, and it was because of the canal. The 363-mile canal was begun at Rome, New York, on July 4th, 1817, and officially opened with a grand parade of boats from Buffalo to New York City on October 26, 1825. So they had a grand opening and a showing of boats. Rapid growth of existing towns and the emergence of new ones had a boom of residents along the Erie Canal. Reduced shipping costs spurred commercial activity and industrialization, creating jobs and further attracting people. The demand of housing construction states that the growing population needed lumber for fuel and to construct buildings, ships, and wagons. So the canal gave people impetus to grow their own crops, package them up. They could send them on the canal. They could get money for them. They could improve more of their land. They could grow more crops. The thing snowballed because of the canal. There was increased demand for land. People wanted more land so they could grow more crops, so they could ship more on the canal and make more money. It's a logical thing. The Erie Canal acted as a catalyst for economic growth, population movement, and urbanization. I tell people it's kind of like the 1800s thruway. You know, you get on the thruway now, you can go from here to there in no time at all. And especially now when you don't have to stop and pay tolls. They run it up on your license plate number, right? But it was the fast way to get from one place to the other. People that use the thruway trucks to transport produce. It's what the Erie Canal was doing. It was the first major highway. They made for marketable crops, more pushing on that. And in the process, more land was cleared. People could build impressive buildings, impressive houses. They didn't have to live in one-room shacks anymore because they had money coming in from their crops. The farmhouses built of cobblestone happened largely between 1825 and 1860. Those were the most prosperous years following the building of the Erie Canal. So money was coming in. The Erie Canal masons may have played a small role in cobblestone houses, but no, I don't think so. Yes, you could probably find someone who worked on the Erie Canal and then help someone build a cobblestone house. But it wasn't a mass of people who worked on the canal, went up and built all the cobblestone houses in Western New York. That didn't happen. Although that is what I was told when I first moved here. When people would talk about cobblestone houses, because I lived in one, now I know more about them. And people would say, well, those were the canal masons, they came up and built cobblestone houses. Well, I heard that for a while, but the more research I did, the more I heard, no, that's not how it was. It's difficult to overstate the importance of the Erie Canal, both regionally and nationally. This is an article written. It says, did cobblestone masons come from the Erie Canal? So it's not just me that heard the story and wondered the truth. But this is a PhD professor who researched this. He said one would classify it as folk art, really, but still a very sophisticated type of art. Just the skill and imagination required to select, arrange rounded stones in the various decorative arrangements, as these master craftsmen did, required both incredible talent and much imagination. Canal stone mason had specific skills to help build the canal. But building a cobblestone house is something very different. The canal, they put large blocks in. Cobblestone is small stones set in rows with the mortar protruding in certain areas, maybe pointed in other areas. It's very decorative. It's not hands-on ground, open this canal kind of construction. It is more detailed and more artistic. This skill set involved a chain of craftsmen working on major products: a stone block cutter, a stone block trimmer, a stone block mason, using limestone exclusively in the building of the canal. The later craftsmen used cranes and pulleys, engineering drawings and supervision, hydraulic cement in the case of the canal locks. So we're talking a lot different kind of construction than those that built cobblestone houses. There's no real connection between the two. This period also represents the peak of New York State branch canal stone masonry work, followed by a huge doubling and lengthening of locks, plus big aqueduct construction on the Erie Canal in the 1840s and 50s. How could these so-called same stonemasons be employed on two major local fronts simultaneously, focusing on specific canal projects while scattered across Hill and Dale and the surrounding countryside, building cobblestone? You can't do them both. You're either working on the canal improvement and enlargement, the large blocks of stone, or you're building a cobblestone house with small cobblestones. The cobblestone masons, there are two theories. One is it was an immigrant group who came here and said, oh, I know how to build cobblestone houses, and started building them. Or it was local people who understood the basics of building a house and adapted cobblestone construction to that. It's that native-born house masons from New England, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania that are held to be the real reasons. All census-proven sources for migrants to upstate New York in the early 19th century, areas where fieldstone houses were abundant, somehow became interested in the plentiful cobblestones found in heaps of glacial till in upstate New York. This is that theory. My theory partially is you had the canal come through, a way to send produce. I've got a farm. I've got limited plowed ground because I had nowhere to ship anything I grew. before the canal. Now the canal's in. All I gotta do is drive 2 miles from the Ridge Road down to Albion, and there's the canal, and I could ship things out. So I'm thinking, I could grow more. If I cleared more land, I could grow more produce. I could ship more things out. Clearing land means taking out trees, which I could turn into lumber and ship out. Clear that land and I could raise more produce. But in clearing that land, especially north of the ridge, I'm running into an awful lot of stone. Because the Ridge Road is the southern edge of Lake Iroquois, the ancestor to Lake Ontario. So Ridge is the southern beach of that pre-glacial or post-glacial lake. So when I clean off my land to raise more produce to send on the canal, I've got to clear out the lumber, but I've also got to clear out stone so that I can plant. So people did end up clearing stone, but as they cleared stone, they found small, rounded, smoothed off pebbles from the action of the water hitting the beach and rounding off those stones. The development of cobblestone buildings, the Erie Canal, and the economic development fostered this important event. For farmers, the canal provided a way to transport their produce to larger markets along the canal's route by allowing these farmers to shift from subsistence farming to cash crops, particularly wheat. Wheat was the big cash crop. Out of the same prosperity came the desire to build more permanently. So masonry construction is more permanent, has greater resistance to fire, does not have to be painted, and has always been associated with solidity and prosperity. So you had stone that you'd cleared off your field so you could plant that wheat. Well, people said, hey, you know what? You can build a fireproof house just like a brick house, only it's using that stone that you just cleared off your field. You don't have to pay anybody for it. You don't have to pay a mason to come and lay up the stone or lay up the brick, make the brick and lay it up. You've got already the items that you need to build your more substantial house. There are a lot of connections between the completion of the canal in 1825 and Cobblestone. The Erie Canal created the economic boom, financially prosperous marketing of the wheat, flour, and cash crops on the Atlantic seaboard. Prosperous farmers were now able to build houses reflecting the prosperity and their confidence in the future. Cobblestone house would be much more fireproof than a conventional wooden frame house. The permanence, as paint was expensive, a cobblestone house would be easier and less expensive to maintain. The building material was free, gathered from the plowed fields, or brought home in ox carts after delivering wheat to ports, such as Sodus, for shipment. Often boys were paid 10 cents a day to walk beside a stone boat to collect stones turned up from plowing. The stone gathering could often take several years. The gathered stone had to be sorted by size and sometimes color. This was a job for children and women. Sometimes there would be neighborhood bee to sort the stones, followed by a big supper and then music and dancing, which I think I'd love to be there. You've got all these women and kids sorting stones for Dad, and now we're going to have a meal, so Mom has to fix the meal too, and then we party afterwards. I think that would have been a fun time to be around. With the canal, as a result, wheat, flour, and lumber accounted for the most tonnage on the canal for the entire 19th century. To demonstrate the boom between 1815 and 1825, the cost of shipping wheat from Buffalo to New York City dropped roughly $100 to $10 per ton. So what had cost before the canal, it cost you $100 a ton to get that produce or whatever to New York City. After the canal, it cost you $10. Much more doable. The Erie Canal indirectly influenced the rise of cobblestone architecture by creating an economic boom that allowed farmers to build more substantial homes using readily available materials like cobblestone. Economic impact facilitated the construction of numerous cobblestone buildings. The Erie Canal was the spur. Cobblestones were readily available. Skill transfer. They say, while not definitely proven, some historians suggest a connection between canal masons and the development of cobblestone. Nah. I'm not saying there was nobody. There might have been one or two, but it was not a large group that came up from the canal and built cobblestone houses. A common folklore that the cobblestone masons were formerly canal masons. The truth is that canal enlargement began in 1832 and continued through 1862, the same time period in which almost half of the cobblestone buildings were built. So people are saying, well, the canal masons built cobblestone houses. Well, no, they were a little busy on the enlargement of the canal during the same period. So if you had worked on the Erie Canal and got paid for that and had a reputation as a good worker, would you stay around to build a cobblestone house, or would you go down to the canal and get a job? You'd go to the canal and get a job. The canal masons would have been kept busy with canal work, such as building locks and aqueducts at the time. Perhaps some canal masons did build cobblestone houses, but it's more likely that local masons and even farmers who had brought the skill with them from Europe constructed the houses. Not only were homes built of cobblestone, but other cobblestone structures included blacksmith shops, churches, factories, schools, stores, barns, smokehouses, mills, carriage houses, and toll houses, and privies. There was even a cobblestone tombstone built in Meridian, New York. The cobblestone masonry building boom lasted less than 3 decades before dying out in 1854. Such as mass-produced bricks and fast-drying Portland cement made the handcrafted cobblestone houses and buildings expensive and impractical to construct. Another factor is that transporting the stones from further away was leading to rising costs. I found this quote in a Genesee Farmer, January 13, 1838. What would look better and be better on our farms than stables, turnip houses, piggeries, and so on, constructed of materials which would not perish in ages, and which could be obtained and put up in an expense within the ready of almost every independent farmer. The stone must be picked up at all events, and we might as well put them together for a building. Promoting building with cobblestone. Bricks were costly to transport and to make. To make them locally was also costly, since clay had to be procured, molded, kilns had to be built, and so on. The farmers and masons used the material they had readily available, and that material did not require painting or maintenance, and most important, was fireproof and weatherproof. Cobblestone buildings, some historians say that the construction of the Erie Canal had an indirect link to cobblestone architecture by creating an economic boom for farmers. The farmers who wanted to show off their new prosperity by building more substantial homes needed easily accessible and cheap building materials. What better and inexpensive product to use than stones that had been gathered from your own fields? 3 construction methods. First, there was the simple rubble wall. That was using bigger stones, not as much pattern. The second was a rubble core with a facing of smaller lake-washed cobbles. So you built that basic wall like in the first period, but then you put a layer on top of it that were smaller stones and more decorative. The third utilized that rubble wall laid first, then a cobblestone veneer laid up separately, but attached to the back wall, and these were all very much smaller stones. The biggest selling point was that cobblestones were free for the taking. The hard stone held by mortar combined to make a solid house that was also virtually soundproof and fireproof. The thick walls kept the house warm in the winter and cool in the summer. So you had temperature also that you could regulate by using this kind of building. There was little outside maintenance and needed no paint, an expensive item back in that day. Not only were homes built of cobblestone, but other cobblestone structures, like we mentioned before, blacksmith shops, churches, which we have, factories, schools, which we have, stores, smokehouses. Probably the most important reason for the decline was that changes in the construction industry, such as mass-produced bricks and fast-drying Portland cement, made the handcrafted cobblestone houses and buildings expensive and impractical to construct. Another factor is that local supply of small stones became more difficult to come by, leading to rising costs in transporting stones into your area. The demise of cobblestone construction coincided with the outbreak of the Civil War, which caused inflation, so masonry became very expensive. Also, the men had gone to war. The work staff was limited. Why build cobblestone structures? Much of it began with the opening of the Erie Canal that brought the economic boom. They were fireproof and avoided the expense of lumber and paint. They could be gathered from plowed fields, for example. And they were also used for, like, one-room schoolhouses. Every community needed one-room schoolhouses. Well, if you could collect the stone from the field nearby and have the mason come over and build it, there was a lot less having to put in monetarily by having someone actually build it with cobblestone. Row Cobblestone Schoolhouse in Butler was built in the 1820s and is believed to be the oldest existing cobblestone schoolhouse in North America. So the 1820s was during the canal being built, but the canal wasn't finished yet. Beautiful churches and parsonages, outbuildings, and former stagecoach taverns and warehouses were all built along the Erie Canal with those cobblestones. I thought I would tell you a little bit on the local angle here. Cyrus Weatherall was a man of English descent, a carpenter, stonemason, and builder, came to Orleans County about 1814 and lived in the village of Gaines. It's one of the earliest examples of Weatherall's work is my house. The house on the Bridge Road between the Cobblestone Church and the Cobblestone School. There are two cobblestone buildings there. One is a small cobblestone house. The other is a cobblestone house that's been added to. That was my house. And according to this article, I know who the builder was, if this person knows what they're talking about. The woodwork in the doorway is very simple, and the stonework is not regular nor as cleverly done as later work. It seems to show a lack of confidence and freedom. So I was the test subject as far as this article is concerned. And I think it may be true. There were other cobblestone masons in the town of Gaines. Archibald Watson, age 61, in the 1855 census, lived 25 years in the town of Gaines. Cyrus Weatherall, that I just mentioned, was 35 years old, born in Orleans County, and probably had worked some 18 years as far as the 1855 census is concerned. The Whipple, Hunt, and Janus houses on the Ridge Road and the Bullard Latin House on Gaines Basin Road are his work. In 1844, he helped to build the Saunders House on Ridge Road west of Gaines. James Thompson was 38 years old and had lived in Orleans County 16 years. He built the Bacon Herd House on Brown Road. Adam Armstrong was 26 years old, locally born, could have worked for at least 8 years on Cobblestone houses. The fifth Mason, Delphi Thompson, was only 20 years old, and in 1855, his work was too limited to be important. It can safely be said that the first 4 men built most of the Cobblestone buildings. So I thought that was interesting, in that I live in the town of Gaines, and some of those men had worked in the town of Gaines. So as I hope you understand, there was a connection between the canal and the Cobblestone houses, but it was not that the Masons came from the canal and went up and built Cobblestone houses. Anybody have any questions? If not, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.